The rain hit the windshield like it was angry. Claire didn't even see him until she almost passed him, a young soldier in fatigues, walking alone, soaked to the bone. Something made her stop. Maybe it was the way he didn't even flinch at the storm. Maybe it was the name on his uniform. She offered him a ride. He said almost nothing. And 3 weeks later, someone knocked on her door, holding her brother's bracelet. But her brother died 18 years ago in Iraq. Claire Morgan had been driving the same route home from work for 7 years, and she'd never stopped for a hitchhiker. Not once. Growing up in a military family teaches you to be cautious about strangers, and losing her brother Tommy in Iraq had only reinforced that instinct. But that Tuesday evening, with rain coming down like the sky was falling apart, something made her pull over. The young soldier was maybe 22, walking along the shoulder of Highway 64 like he had all the time in the world. His army fatigues were soaked through, his boots heavy with mud, and he wasn't even trying to flag down cars, just walking steadily through the storm as if getting drenched was part of his mission. Claire rolled down her passenger window and called out over the rain, "You planning to walk all the way to base in this weather?" He stopped and looked at her, really looked, like he was trying to figure out if she was real. Up close, she could see he was young, maybe younger than Tommy had been when he deployed. His name tape read Beck, and there was something in his eyes that reminded her of the expression Tommy used to get when he was carrying weight that wasn't physical. "I don't want to be any trouble, ma'am," he said, rain dripping from his hair. "More trouble to leave you out here to catch pneumonia," Claire replied. "Get in." He hesitated for a moment, then jogged around to the passenger side and climbed in, bringing the smell of rain and something else, that particular scent of someone who'd been carrying a heavy pack for too long. "Thank you," he said quietly, settling into the seat. "I just need to get back to Fort Lee." Claire nodded and pulled back onto the road. The silence in the car wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was thick with unspoken things. She noticed him glancing at her wrist, where she wore a simple silver bracelet she'd had made after Tommy's funeral. It had his name engraved on it, his unit, and the date he died, something she could carry with her always. "Your brother?" he asked after a few minutes, nodding toward the bracelet. "Yeah, Tommy. He was a Marine, served in Iraq. We lost him in 2005. The soldier Beck went very still. "I'm sorry, that's hard. It was a long time ago," Claire said, though it never really felt like a long time ago. "You serve over there?" "Afghanistan. Just got back a few months ago." His voice was careful, controlled. "We lost our squad leader last year, Sergeant Ramirez. He was the only one who really looked out for us younger guys, made sure we knew what we were doing, kept us alive." Claire understood. She'd heard Tommy talk about leaders like that, the ones who became like older brothers to the 18 and 19-year-olds who found themselves in impossible situations. She reached into her cup holder and handed him a travel mug of coffee she'd picked up at the gas station. "It's not great coffee, but it's hot." He took it like she'd offered him something precious. "Thank you." Most people wouldn't have stopped. Most people didn't have a brother who used to walk home in storms like this just to prove he could, Claire said. When they reached the base, Beck got out and stood by the driver's window for a moment. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, and in the glow of the base's security lights, he looked even younger. "I appreciate the ride. Really. Take care of yourself," Claire said, and meant it. She watched him walk through the gate, shoulders straight despite everything, and drove home thinking about Tommy and wondering if someone had ever given him a ride when he needed one. 3 weeks later, Claire was spending a quiet Saturday afternoon folding laundry and listening to an old jazz album when someone knocked on her front door. It wasn't the casual knock of a neighbor or the practiced rhythm of a delivery driver. This was official, measured, the kind of knock that made her stomach tighten. She opened the door to find a uniformed army officer standing on her porch. He was probably in his 40s, with the bearing of someone who'd delivered difficult news before. "Miss Morgan? I'm Captain Rodriguez from Fort Lee. I wonder if I could speak with you for a moment." Claire's first thought was that something had happened to Beck, the young soldier she'd given a ride to. "Is this about Private Beck?" "Yes, ma'am. May I come in?" Claire led him to her living room, where he sat carefully on the edge of her couch and pulled a small cloth bundle from his pocket. "We believe this belongs to you," he said, unwrapping it to reveal her brother's bracelet. Claire stared at it, confused. She looked down at her wrist. Her bracelet was right there, where it always was. But this was identical, down to the engraving. "I don't understand," she said. "Private Beck has been absent without leave for the past week. When we processed his personal effects from his barracks, we found this bracelet along with a note." Captain Rodriguez pulled out a folded piece of paper. "He wrote that it belonged to the woman who treated me like a human when I needed it most." Claire took the note with shaking hands. In careful handwriting, it read, "To the woman who treated me like a human. He was your hero. You were mine. Thank you for the coffee and the kindness. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger." "Where is he?" Claire asked. "We don't know. He was granted a 72-hour pass last weekend and never returned. We've contacted his family, but they haven't heard from him either. Before he left, he mentioned something about visiting a town near Route 57. Does that mean anything to you?" Claire's heart sank. Route 57 led to a dozen small towns, but she knew exactly which one Beck might have meant. There was a diner there, Miller's, where she and Tommy used to eat breakfast every Sunday morning before he deployed. It was Tommy's favorite place, and she'd mentioned it during their ride that night. "I might know where he is," she said. Claire drove to Miller's diner as the sun was coming up on Sunday morning. The place looked exactly the same as it had 18 years ago: red vinyl booths, checkered floor, the smell of bacon, grease, and coffee that had been brewing since before dawn. Marge, the owner, was behind the counter and recognized Claire immediately. "Haven't seen you in a while, honey. How you been?" "I'm looking for someone," Claire said. "A young soldier, army uniform, about 22, quiet. Would have been through here maybe a week ago?" Marge's expression grew concerned. "Yeah, I remember him. Saturday, right there in the corner booth. The one where you and Tommy used to sit. Ordered the same thing Tommy always got too. Pancakes and black coffee." "Did he say anything?" "Not much. Just asked if I knew anything about the hiking trails up in the state forest. Said he needed some time to think. Paid his bill and left a $20 tip on a $6 breakfast." Marge shook her head. "I should have asked if he was okay. He had that look, you know, like he was carrying the world on his shoulders." Claire knew the trails Marge was talking about. She and Tommy had hiked them as kids, and later, during his leave time, they'd go up there when he needed to get away from everything. There was a clearing about 2 miles in where Tommy used to sit and think, especially after he came back from his first deployment changed. She bought a thermos of coffee and some sandwiches from Marge and headed for the trailhead. The forest was quiet except for the sound of her boots on the path and the occasional bird call. She followed the familiar trail, past the old oak tree where she and Tommy had carved their initials when they were kids, past the creek where they used to catch minnows in mason jars. As she approached the clearing, she saw him. Beck was sitting on a fallen log, her brother's bracelet in his hands, staring at it like it might hold answers to questions he couldn't voice. He'd lost weight, and his uniform was wrinkled and dirty, but he was alert when she approached. "I wondered if you'd figure out where I'd gone," he said without looking up. Claire sat down on the log beside him, not too close, and pulled out the thermos. "Coffee?" He accepted the cup gratefully. "How did you know I'd be here?" "My brother used to come to this spot when he needed to think. I figured if you'd found Miller's diner, you might have found this place too." They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee and listening to the wind in the trees. "I had this made after Tommy died," Claire said finally, touching her own bracelet. "I needed something to carry with me, something that would remind me that he was real, that he mattered. I saw it that night when you gave me the ride," Beck said, "and I kept thinking about what you said, about how he used to walk home in storms, about how someone had looked out for him." He held up the second bracelet. "I had this made because I wanted to remember that someone had looked out for me too. Just for one night, someone treated me like I was worth something." "You are worth something," Claire said gently. Beck shook his head. "Ramirez died because of me. We were on patrol, and I froze when we took fire. He came back for me, and that's when the IED went off. He had kids, Claire, 2 little girls, and he died because I couldn't do my job." Claire had heard variations of this story before, from other veterans who'd found their way to her door over the years. The survivor's guilt, The weight of decisions made in impossible circumstances. The way trauma could twist reality until you couldn't see anything clearly. "What would Sergeant Ramirez tell you if he were here right now?" she asked. Beck was quiet for a long time. "He'd tell me to stop being an idiot and get back to work. He'd say the best way to honor him was to take care of the other guys in the unit." "Sounds like a smart man." "He was. He saved all of us, one way or another, just like you saved me that night." "I just gave you a ride, Adam." "You gave me more than that. You reminded me that there are still good people in the world, that maybe I wasn't as broken as I thought I was." Claire didn't try to convince Beck to come back with her that day. Instead, she told him she'd return tomorrow, and the day after that, until he was ready. She left him with food and a clean jacket, and she kept her word. For 5 days, she made the drive to the forest. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. Beck told her about his unit, about the friends he'd lost and the ones he'd left behind. He talked about growing up in a small town in Ohio, about joining the army to pay for college, about the weight of expectations and the fear of disappointing people who believed in him. Claire shared stories about Tommy, about the way he'd changed after his first deployment, about the letters he'd send home that were carefully cheerful but couldn't quite hide his struggles. She told Beck about the months after Tommy's death, when she'd felt lost and angry and couldn't see the point of anything. "What changed?" Beck asked on the 4th day. "I started volunteering at the VA hospital. Nothing dramatic. Just reading to guys who couldn't see well, playing cards with people who were lonely. I realized that Tommy's death didn't have to be meaningless if I could use it to help other people." On the 5th day, Beck handed her both bracelets. "I think I'm ready to go back, but I'd like you to walk with me if that's okay." "Of course." They walked back to the trailhead together, talking about practical things, how Beck would explain his absence, what support services were available at the base, how Claire could stay in touch if he needed someone to talk to. At her car, Beck hesitated. "I don't know if I can be the soldier I was before." "Maybe you're not supposed to be," Claire said. "Maybe you're supposed to be something different now, something better." Beck turned himself in that afternoon. Claire drove him to the base and waited while he reported to his commanding officer. The consequences weren't as severe as they could have been. His clean record and the circumstances of his absence were taken into account, and he was assigned to counseling and restricted to base for 30 days. During those 30 days, Claire visited him twice a week. They'd sit in the base coffee shop and talk about books, about his counseling sessions, about the letters he'd started writing to Sergeant Ramirez's family. Slowly, Beck began to find his footing again. He started attending group therapy sessions with other veterans, and eventually, he began mentoring younger soldiers who were struggling with their own demons. He found that helping others helped him process his own grief and guilt. 6 months later, Claire received an invitation to Beck's promotion ceremony. He'd been advanced to specialist and was being assigned to a unit that worked with veterans transitioning back to civilian life. At the ceremony, Beck's commanding officer spoke about second chances, about the importance of community support, and about soldiers who turn their struggles into strength. After the formal ceremony, Beck found Claire in the crowd. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a small wrapped package. Inside was a silver bracelet engraved with 2 names, Tommy Morgan and Miguel Ramirez, along with the words, "Heroes who continue to serve." "I thought you might like to carry them both," Beck said. "They're both still looking out for people, through the people they touched." Claire felt tears in her eyes as she fastened the bracelet around her wrist, next to Tommy's original bracelet. "They'd be proud of you, Adam. Both of them." 2 years later, Claire still wears both bracelets. Beck writes to her regularly from his new assignment in Colorado, where he's working with a program that helps veterans find housing and employment. He's engaged to a teacher he met at a community college, where he's studying social work. The program Beck started at Fort Lee, connecting struggling soldiers with community mentors, has expanded to 3 other bases. Claire coordinates the civilian volunteer side of the program, matching veterans with people who understand that sometimes the most powerful healing happens when someone simply shows up and refuses to leave. She still drives Route 64 to work every day, and she still stops for soldiers who need rides. Her car usually contains extra coffee, snacks, and a list of phone numbers for people who specialize in helping veterans navigate the difficult transition back to civilian life. The story of the bracelet has become part of the program's informal training, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can save a life, and that healing is rarely a solitary journey. Tommy's memory lives on, not just in Claire's heart, but in the lives of young soldiers who learn that it's okay to struggle, okay to ask for help, and possible to transform pain into purpose. And Adam Beck, who once felt broken beyond repair, now spends his days proving that everyone deserves a second chance, a helping hand, and a ride through the storm.